I'd like to apologize to 100 Girlfriends for ever thinking that the Piggy Isekai might be a more wild show, because while one may be far more weird, nothing could ever hope to match the energy that 100 Girlfriends provides. This show is a young child on a sugar rush, SpongeBob flooring it during his boating test, and your local crack addict at 3 a.m. rolled all into one. I would also like to apologize to 100 Girlfriends for thinking that it was going to be stupid the entire time. Unexpectedly, I cried to a parody harem, but more on that later. Harem is a genre that has been around for a while now and has always had a pretty bumpy reputation. Isekai kind of fits into the same bill, albeit it's kind of reaching critical mass with how far it's starting to go. I mean, come on, I just mentioned a dude getting turned into a pig, and that is entirely ignoring the fact that we just had a dude get reincarnated as a vending machine in just the last season. Anime, manga, and light novels are a competitive space that requires the authors to tap into storied niches like fluff, romance, or to tap deep into the well of already worn out genres. These genres are deep into the well for a reason though, as they are proven to work. I never understood why people got so enthralled with reality TV shows like The Bachelor or Bachelorette until I got more and more into anime, because harems are basically the same thing. There's a number of girls, usually like 4 or more, all with different personalities and stories that you choose your favorite from, and hope for them to win it all because you want their happiness. Unless you're Rent-A-Girlfriend, of course, in which case winning is actually the greatest form of losing. I've always found it fun in stories though, investing myself in whatever is happening in some way. Whether I'm actively rooting for a character's best interest or preying on their downfall, my mind is always doing something to engage with the story. It's how I keep from getting bored with anything. With harem, it's making a decision on who I like best and following through to the end to see if they can win. Of course, most of the time it ends in my personal agony, as I can never have nice things and I'm always rooting for the girl who has been telegraphed to take the fat L ever since the very start. That's what I get for being a sucker for the childhood friend trope. Funny enough, there's actually a harem for that. It actually fits perfectly into the general concept I wanted to touch on before moving on to the main topic, and that's the things that harems are doing these days in order to stand out. Osamake, the rom-com where the childhood friend won't lose, promised me something that I wanted. It lured me in with a reality that I didn't think was possible, only for the true nature of the anime to reveal itself as literally every love interest in the show is the main character's childhood friend. I went from supreme confidence to my favorite winning to absolutely none. Also, the anime wasn't that good, but that aside, it goes to show that even just a goofy variation in the way that something is presented can mean all of the difference in whether or not someone picks it up. Harems are already pretty absurd to begin with, so the more out there you go, the more likely it is that people will at least read the story initially. Just a couple of other series that come to mind are Quintessential Quintuplets and Date A Live. Quints isn't a giant change in the formula, but to have all 5 girls be sisters is a variation that hadn't been done before, or if it had, not effectively. It gave a more interesting premise than competitors, and to top it off, it was actually pretty well written as far as harems go. Despite the ending being a bit rushed to its conclusion, it's one of the better harem series I've gone through, and as I was actually invested in the characters and their relationships, especially because the girls interacted with each other and not just the main character, it made things feel a lot more real and interesting. Date A Live is a bit more towards the wild side of the creativity spectrum, and honestly, I can see myself doing a full video on the show and how it succeeds with its premise, so I won't go too in-depth here, but it's practically the perfect example of a wild premise to make harem work. It already starts off pretty interesting with the main character needing to turn these spirits who could very well destroy the world to his side by making them fall in love with him, but it continues to expand on that. The first season is pretty typical in nature with how it approaches this, but it doesn't let itself get stale as it goes on. I mean, the main character needing to get a lesbian to fall in love with him is about as peak stupid fun as it gets. With all these wild harems and more getting created as time passes, it takes something truly insane to stand out, and that's where our main topic of 100 Girlfriends comes in. The concept's foundation is already crazy with 100 potential soulmates, but the series takes it even further with the idea that any soulmate that he rejects will die. It may be stupid, but it's also dumb. The peak of absurdity. However, it's not the only identity that the anime has. I started writing the script after episode 2, but I stopped quite literally 2 sentences ago and decided to see how the 3rd episode would play out. I am beyond glad I did, because now there's an entirely different perspective that can be tackled in regards to the show. The parody took itself seriously. As mentioned, this series is insane at its core, even outside of the premise. Just the way things tend to unfold usually go beyond the constructs of reality. Episode 1 gave us characters who are upfront about their feelings in a romance anime, which is almost unfathomable. Not to mention the tsundere, who is like 1000% soon, also has moments where she's honest with her feelings. We are also literally introduced to God, who tends to break the fourth wall as well, which is pretty funny. I guess he is God, so he can do that, I guess. Episode 2 might have been more terrifying than any horror anime that I've seen up to this point with the Vice Principal. What her tongue did to that poor student is seared into my retinas, and I'll never be able to forget it. Topped off with her climbing along the walls and ceiling makes for an experience that, once again, absolutely never going to forget. With all the stuff that I just mentioned, you'd think that this anime is just one big shitpost, and to be honest, that's exactly what I was thinking it was going to be the entire time. Then the anime made me cry. Under most circumstances, I don't think I would have cried to the content of episode 3, but I was caught so unbelievably off guard during my watch that it just sort of happened anyway. The pace and comedic value of Hakuri and Karane set a tone that probably convince people that it would be the same for the other characters. The episode doesn't immediately disprove this by any means. Shizuka is a character who, like the other two goobers, is an extreme caricature of the archetype that she represents. The shy girl in a rom-com is an absolute classic, but instead of just stammering over her words like the typical girl, Shizuka is pretty much incapable of speaking to others at all. She does defy her trope a little bit as well, kind of like how Karane can be honest with herself when she's pushed a little bit despite being a super tsundere. She's shy and finds it impossible to talk with others, but it seems she doesn't really struggle to at least interact. Her favorite book acts as a vehicle for speech, allowing her to be normal in most other regards as far as we've been shown up to this point. The pacing shifts pretty heavily in this episode as well. The previous two kind of felt like time just completely flew by with what we were doing, but this one was far more akin to a typical anime episode with logical progressions instead of a bundle of chaos. I also think it sets an important precedent going forward that not every single soulmate that Rentaro runs into is going to be as simple to wrangle in as the first two. We knew Rentaro was a good person already from everything that we had experienced. He's a kind soul who spent hours looking for a contact on the floor, a whole night looking for 2 4-leaf clovers just to ease the superstitions of girls that he cared for, and he was willing to sacrifice his first kiss to the devil itself just so that Hakuri and Karane would get along with each other better. His dedication is certainly presented to us, but I feel like here we get to see just why this 100 girlfriends thing is going to work out. Set apart from the typical harem protagonist, he isn't some random horny loser that gets girls inexplicably to fall in love with him one by one. Rentaro is a pure Giga Chad. How he got rejected 100 times before this, I have no clue, because it's clear to me that he is a keeper. The lengths that he went to in order not only to help Shizuka, but to better understand her is Nobel Peace Prize worthy. He doesn't know her circumstances with using the book to speak, and while it may, on a technical level, be healthier for her to learn to take a step forward and use her words, he knows he can't and shouldn't force her to do so. The part where I actually cried was during Shizuka's flashback when she saw Rentaro with his girlfriends and was overcome with a wave of self-doubt. I wasn't surprised to see the typical mean girl anime bullies, but I was completely caught off guard by her mother being verbally abusive towards her in regards to using the book to speak instead of words. This part transitioned into the reveal of what Rentaro was working on in the days he hadn't been around Shizuka, where I was fully expecting him to have memorized the book in order to make it so she didn't feel out of place. But instead, he transcribed the entire thing word by word into a text file that she could play the words out loud in order to have a more connected experience with others. I felt, given how insane he was, that memorizing the book was surely what he'd do, but I was glad to be wrong in this instance. My idea left her in a position where communicating would only be more comfortable with him, but he came up with a solution that would make things easier for her with everyone. We've already seen Hakuri and Karane developing a small friendship with each other, so it's likely that this will help Shizuka be friends with all the future girlfriends, which is a nice little touch. The team that worked on this episode did not hold back with the imagery and the general design of the episode. It's pretty bright from the early portions in terms of colors, but once we hit that emotional spot right before and during the flashback, the colors toned down considerably. We move into more of an in-between state after, with the warmth of the sunset in tandem with the shadows from what little light is left in the room when the confession scene takes place, and then it explodes into color as the confession happens and it is accepted. It's a series that understands the gravity of the premise it undertakes and sets up early characters for future success by making you fall in love with them as people, but also making sure they can exist alongside everything else that is established. 100 Girlfriends, believe it or not, is a lot of girlfriends and needs to be ready to maximize the screen time that each girl gets as the series gets deeper into its story. All of the characters so far have been likable, which is an important thing in these stages. Once we are further along, the sheer amount of characters will make up for any that someone might not be a big fan of, but it also means that we can only spend so much time with each character regardless. Date A Live started to run into this issue a bit more now that it has 4 seasons with a 5th on the way. The screen time for each girl is incredibly difficult to come by, as Shido has to get a new girl basically every 4 to 6 episodes with how the show paces itself. It will be interesting to see how 100 Girlfriends will navigate these waters going forward, as it's obviously going to have a much harder time spreading the love. Despite a pretty character intro heavy episode, we did get to see the other two girls a few times throughout the episode, so it does seem like it's trying to be considerate of how it's handling things. To say the least, my expectations have been blown out of the water. I said on my podcast that it was everything I was looking for in something stupid, but episode 3 just proved that I need to be on my toes with this anime, as it might provide more of a well-written experience than I ever could have expected after the first couple of weeks. I'm sure that 100 Girlfriends will continue to be a fun ride, and I cannot wait to go through multiple cores of this insane yet surprisingly emotional journey. If you liked the video, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the like button for more anime-based content like this. But before you go, I just opened up channel memberships. If you're interested in supporting me and the channel's future growth, there are a multitude of tiers to pick from so that you can find something that suits you best. You can earn loyalty badges, emotes to use in comments and live chat, getting access to old videos that I have sealed away because I cringe at them now, and even more. So once again, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in another video.